And we are back for another casual conversation with the classic guys. I'm here with none other, someone that wears so many hats, kind of an unsung hero at All Elite Wrestling, Aubrey Edwards. What's going on?
Hello. I appreciate the call out for multiple hats because I was like, do I wear a hat on this podcast? And then funny enough,
I actually had to make that. I had to make that decision too because I adjusted my hair and I'm like, if it doesn't look good, I'm gonna throw in a hat. And then I was like, you know what? It's looking okay, so I'll leave it for now. But I know you do a ton. We've actually the first time I actually met you, or actually probably talked to you, was in Florida for Revolution 2022, I think.
Good show.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I might have been a little intoxicated, but I just wanted to introduce myself that day.
I mean, if it's a pay-per-view day, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
No, but it was after the show at the hotel. I got invited there by someone's parents of someone that wrestles there that I'm close with, and then I was having drinks with them, and then I hung out with the Defy promoters a little bit. And then Matt
and Jim, I love those guys.
Yeah, and then I was hanging out with them for a little bit because I know them really well. And then I was talking to Ricky Starks and I saw I just wanted to introduce myself to you because I'm like, I know you do a lot. I just wanted you to be aware of my Instagram page, the Wrestling Classic, and everything.
I remember now. It's called coming back to me.
Yeah.
We've had one or two pay-per-views since then, so
no, for sure. 2022 feels like ages ago,
right?
I forget who I was talking to. I'm like, yeah, I've known you since 2018. I'm like, oh wow, it's 2024 now.
Yeah, I'm still accidentally writing 2022 on everything, so there you go.
The only 2 years that are kind of a write-off, and a lot of good things did come out of them, was 2020 and 2021, though. Because I'm like, I feel like we shouldn't have aged those 2 years. It could have taken 2 years off.
Which is arguably difficult because I think we all aged a little bit more during those 2 years than every other year on the planet.
And good things came out of it. Don't be wrong. I wouldn't have been doing these interviews if there wasn't a pandemic and I didn't get stuck in Vancouver. So things like that. I want to start off with you, though, going back to the beginning, because I like to just know, what were your earliest memories of professional wrestling?
Ooh, so I am sort of the anomaly in that I did not watch wrestling as a kid. I did not get into it until WrestleMania 27. So I was well out of college at that point.
Okay.
And my friends and I all got together to watch it because The Rock and Stone Cold were coming back. And they had grown up watching wrestling. So that was sort of their big thing of let's make it like a Super Bowl party. So we all got together, we all brought chips and dip. There was prop bets and stuff. But I literally don't know anything. I'm Googling who the Undertaker is because I'm like, isn't wrestling predetermined? Why does a streak matter? I don't understand. This is kind of weird. And not really fully understanding the scope of things. And then fast forward a couple months, at that point, that was the thing that got my husband hooked on it. And he kept watching and was showing me a bunch of clips and whatnot. And I just got sucked into it. It was great because my background is in classical ballet, which is a performance art that uses your entire body to tell a story. And now I'm in professional wrestling, which is a performance art that uses your body to tell a story. So you can kind of see how once I understood that correlation, I'm like, oh, I get it now. This is fantastic. And it's just off to the races, traveling for indie shows, watching everything that I could find under the sun for all of my favorite people. And then I had no intention of ever joining this business. And it was just by sheer accident. And now I'm here talking to you.
I know, it's incredible. And I usually do think it's a very cliche question, but I like asking because when you actually ask people, you'll find out oh, some people were lifelong fans and some of them got into it later in life. Or some of them just watched it with their parents. And my dad used to watch it, my brother used to watch it, and then somehow now they're doing it. And it's always interesting. And I think the one thing I take away from that is the ballet part. It's insane because it's you kind of, once you understood it a bit more, and since you started at an older age, because I think when you start when you're young, it's the whole suspend your disbelief, you're believing in the characters, you get sucked in that way. But you starting at when you started, it's almost you saw the performance aspect of it, and we're oh, this is cool. These guys are working really hard. I understand this to an extent, right?
Right. It's a lot I think it's the same thing. There's still that suspension of disbelief aspect of it because if we're doing our jobs right, you're enthralled in the story. And the benefit of wrestling is because they are these real people, and who real people are, little bits of that personality comes into their character. You're suddenly sort of more invested than you would be if it was just, say, the Nutcracker, because I care about the wrestler behind the character I'm seeing on TV. So not only am I rooting for, say, Bryan Danielson this weekend, I'm rooting for Bryan Danielson, the person, because of all of the amazing things that he's done in his career.
No, and definitely that's true, because with wrestling, there's still always going to be that blurred line more than when you're watching a movie or a television show or something. What's going on with wrestling. You're But I don't know, like that could this could be real. This one thing right here seems honest and for real, so that's 100% sure. But I just mean, like, I know you definitely saw it from the performance aspect and like could appreciate it like that more. Because I feel like when I talk to friends that maybe stopped watching wrestling, it's because like, oh, we found out this and this, and they're like, why did you continue to like it? I'm like, I think I started appreciating everything that gets put into it around it to make me believe. And I think once you get that, that's what makes you an adult fan, that like, regardless what your opinions are on the internet or what you like or what you don't like, you just always have this genuine appreciation of like, I can't hate it. Like, I just can't. Like,
right. And it's so unique from a performance art standpoint. Like I've said this before, but like wrestling is the only type of theater that has a symbiotic relationship with the audience. Like as a ballerina, you spend months and months rehearsing this piece, and then you go out on stage, you perform it, and then once you're done, everyone claps out of appreciation. Whereas in wrestling, you have the crowd cheering and booing, and the performers actually have the opportunity to kind of tweak what it is they're doing based on the audience response. And it's the only art that does that. You're not in a movie theater cheering and then suddenly like the story's going to change, right? Like it's like, no, it's what's filmed is what's filmed. Whereas like we've seen time and time again in the history of wrestling where someone who maybe wasn't planned to have that big run, like the crowd gets behind, and suddenly we have to start seeing them succeed in different ways or overcome various different challenges that maybe weren't in the original timeline. And that's part of what really drew me into it, is it felt like this evolution of performance art.
Yeah, it's kind of improv on the spot in a sense, because the fans are just as much a part of it as anything else. A great example people always like to use is that Rock Hogan match at WrestleMania 18, where they both came in there. I was like, you know, Rock was the big good guy, Hogan was the bad guy, but that Toronto crowd switched it around, and they switched it on the spot during that match. Like, they switched their roles, and that happens. How'd you get into refereeing?
Oh, buddy. So I retired from dance April of 2017. I was 30 years old. My body was fried. I wasn't making any money doing it, like maybe a couple bucks here and there, not enough for it to be a sustainable hobby long term. And I just kind of needed a moment to step away from it. And when I did that, I realized how valuable it was to me, not only as a pastime that I enjoyed, but as a way of self-expression. And not having that outlet to express myself, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm really depressed. This isn't good. I need to kind of fill this void with something. It was right around the same time. My husband had been wrestling on the indies for about a year and a half at that point with a local Seattle promotion. And I knew everyone there because, you know, I'd been to the shows, all the sort of thing. I'm being a supportive wife. And the referee corps at the time was like, hey, you know, we're opening up a spot and we know that you have all this free time now. We think you would enjoy it. I'm like, why the hell would I do that? Like, I'd really enjoy wrestling. I have no intention of doing that. They're like, just trust us, give it a shot. So I showed up to a class. I tried it. It was terrible. There's suddenly a lot of things that change when you stand behind wrestlers. Like, we sort of see how bodies move and we can predict sort of what the movements are. And then suddenly when you're behind them, all of your sort of bodily cues go away. So it feels very weird when all these people that I know personally, I'm now standing in the way and they're bumping into me and I just feel awful.
No, it's awkward. So like I had an experience like that too, where I did an interview with a couple of wrestlers at their wrestling school. And he's like, can you just jump in here and ref a couple of the drills? And I'm like, oh, this is a lot more complicated.
And you're getting blown up at the same time. You're like, wait, I have to get up how quickly? Like, what's
get out of the way and move. I'm like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought. So yeah, no, definitely.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But yeah, like I tried it. It was a little awkward at first, but I tried it again, a little bit better. That was May of 2017. Then I did my first show. By I think by July, I was doing shows up near you in Vancouver with ECCW. I was doing like the Russian Community Center. I was in New Westminster. I was in Surrey working with a bunch of other companies. Like, and then the next year, I was doing tryouts at WWE. I was in California. I was doing Florida. I was doing WrestleMania weekends. Like, I just kind of hit the ground running. And then 2019, I'm with AEW on day one.
That's insane. That's crazy. We must have crossed paths while you were here. Then
we probably have. If
like,
you've ever heard of Girl Hebner, like I was up there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know. I've heard that since back in the day. But I mean, like I went to so many of those shows, and like 2016, 17, 18. I was at a lot of the ECCW shows covering them. I probably have you in videos and don't even know it.
You probably do. If like you go
That,
back, and there's 2017 and 18, early 2019, and there's some like
Yeah.
girl referees standing behind, like yelling at like
Yeah,
Travis
'cause-
and Icarus, who are now like doing their thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
no,
yeah, that
no,
was
for
me.
sure. I was filming a lot of this stuff for social media and putting a lot of this stuff out there, ASW, ECCW, all that stuff. So it's like, oh, that's crazy. We must have crossed paths. I know you were recently for NEW, but I just mean like back then we must have.
I did ASW a lot, like down in Surrey.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had no idea. I'm gonna go like look back and see
Small
if I can
world.
find anything. Yeah, like that referee story I told you was with like El Phantasmo, Nicole Matthews, and Artemis, and LP was the one. LP was the one that was like, jump in the ring, Justin Ref, and then next thing I was getting stomped in the corner. But like, good old LP. But like that's what I mean. It's crazy. Small world. What does that mean to you now? Like, say I'm gonna break the fourth wall a little bit because I don't know for sure when this is gonna drop. But Wrestle Dream's here this weekend, and Wrestle Dream was here in Seattle last weekend. Like, how cool is it for you? You know, now you travel with AEW all around the place. You get to come referee back in the Pacific Northwest, and every time they give you such a great like you get a great reception from that Washington crowd, Pacific Northwest crowd. Like, they know you, they feel like you're one of theirs. Like, what does that mean to you?
It's really interesting because like I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Northern California. I moved up here for college. As you're aware, this is a very big tech industry. I was previously in video games. So once I graduated, I kind of just stayed in here because this is where the work was. And now this is where all my friends are. Like I own a home. It's kind of this is where I've sort of forced my mom to move up here. So now my family's here. Like there's no reason to leave. But it's one of those things, like I've now lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. So I consider myself a true Seattleite. A lot of our Pacific Northwestern roster doesn't actually live here now. So me and Nick Wayne are holding down the fort. No big deal, whatever. So it's always really great that like I am at home. Like there's that joy of driving to work, considering that like I'm normally doing like an 8-hour travel day flying to the East Coast. So it's, from that aspect, it's great. But the other aspect is like going to buildings that I have seen shows in, like Climate Pledge last year, for instance. Like famously, Bryan Danielson had retired in that building, and I had been front row crying my eyes out when it happened. I've seen Kraken games in that building. Tacoma Dome, I've been there for other shows. I work with an independent promotion down in Tacoma called SOS Pro Wrestling. So I'm down in Tacoma at least like once or twice a month anyway. So it's kind of interesting that it's like my stomping grounds. It's suddenly like I turned from my normal everyday person into this like Aubrey Edwards person that only exists in certain contexts. And it's weird for me to like pack a bag after I've slept in my own bed, but it's really cool. It's gratifying.
It must be a cool feeling. Like I said, like I was at that first January, like 4th or 5th show they did in Seattle, that first Dynamite. I was there for Wrestle Dream. And like when you come out, you get those Aubrey chants, and it must be like, oh, that's nice. That's cool. Like, I'm recognized in my town. Like it's a cool feeling.
It's pretty cool. Like, and they actually happen in like, not to toot my own horn, but like they actually happen in a lot of other cities, and it's always great. The biggest one where it kind of like really hit for me was the first time I saw little girls dressed like me in the crowd. Like that's an insane feeling that like when you impact someone so much that they decide they're going to purchase clothing to look like you at shows. Like there was one time I was at a show and this little girl had dressed up like me, and then she did her makeup and her nails the same that I had done the last time I was there. And I'm like, the attention to detail for some of these fans is absolutely incredible. I mean, so it's always great.
The AEW fans are some of the most passionate, like loyal fans in the world. So it's insane. I heard you talk about it a little bit when you did a thing with Cody a long time ago, probably back in 2019. But what happened with WWE when you did go for the tryout there?
I mean, it's an entertainment business. People just choose and pick who they want to fill in a role and whatnot. I was really fortunate to get the opportunities I did with them. I got to do the Mae Young Classic, the second one. I got to do their Evolution pay-per-view. I got to do a couple of their like local shows in the Florida area. And if anything, I got a lot of growth opportunities out of it. Like being able to learn from some of the best people in the industry, like really does impact impact you as a referee, especially on the indies. And there are a lot of lessons that I took from that I still use to this day. I've also made great connections. Like the first time I met Ricochet was at one of those shows. So it was very funny when we suddenly met back up at work and I'm like, hey, how's it going, buddy? And he's like, yeah, this was a matter of time. I'm like, yeah, I know. It was great. And, so it's just always really like fun and interesting seeing like kind of who you see before and then who comes across your path later. But I mean, I don't know why that it didn't work out. Ultimately, it ended up working out for me really, really well. I'd like if you believe in, you know, the universe working out that way, then it definitely did for me. So I'm not complaining.
No, 100%. It's awesome. That is such an interesting thing. I remember having a conversation with Danielson about when he first came to AEW about, you know, it's crazy. Like when you spend enough time around this business, even like as an outsider to an extent, like you connect with a lot of people and you see them on the independents or you work with them in different places, but then you go work somewhere else and you kind of drift and you're busy and you don't talk as much as you used to. And the next thing you end up in the same place again and it's like no time is gone. You're like, oh, hey, like I told you I'd hit you up down the road and like it happens and you cross paths a lot again. And I think it's a really cool thing that happens.
Hey, yo, have you guys heard about 500 Level? They make officially licensed WWE merchandise. And I actually have been working with them on a couple of designs. A design that I worked on recently was with a girl named Caitlin, who's a big Dakota Kai fan. And we designed this new Dakota Kai shirt, which you can get exclusively now at 500 Level. Once again, officially licensed with the WWE. Really wanted a new Dakota Kai shirt. Got this one designed and made, and it's on the website now, on sale now, 500level.com. Guys, join their partnership program. You get discounts the more shirts you buy, 10%, 20%, 30%. You earn points and you get a discount. They have OG shirts, guys. I had to re-up on my NWO shirts on 500 Level, the comfortable material if you get the premium shirts, but even the non-premium is super comfortable. I got NWO shirts. I got Shawn Michaels shirts. You can find some of your favorite wrestlers on there. You can find none other than guys like Razor Ramon, the bad guy. Check out this shirt. It's a sweet, sweet shirt, everybody. 500level.com. Like I said, they have the NWO stuff. And if you're like a big NXT fan, they got shirts for all of your favorite NXT wrestlers. And if they don't, let me know and I'll make sure we get some shirts made for your favorite NXT wrestler. I went to go support my girl, Carmen Petrovic. You guys can check out our casual conversation on my YouTube channel. You can check out mine and Carmen Petrovic's casual conversation. But 500 Level had a Carmen Petrovic shirt. I had to go support my fellow Canadian and the homie Carmen Petrovic, guys. 500level.com, guys. Check them out. Get premium, officially licensed WWE shirts that you cannot find in a WWE shop all the time. They have a huge selection on their website also for MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL. They got shirts for everything, but their wrestling selection is insane. Custom creative designs. Maybe I can work together with someone out there that is an editor that wants to put more designs on their website. Hit me up. 500level.com. Check them out and keep doing the thing.
I'm gonna ask you a couple of just like fun quick questions. What's the craziest bump you've ever taken?
Oh, buddy. Let me think. I mean, taking a chair, or not a chair, taking a guitar from Karen Jarrett at a Double or Nothing a couple years back was not fun. And I don't know about you, but this is probably something you've never experienced, but digging splinters out of extensions is not a pleasant experience. And my head hurt pretty bad. So I couldn't ref for the next Dynamite. I was a little concerned. Ended up turning into a full-on match, which you could argue is like the most insane bump.
I was going to ask you, that turned into a match. It did, right?
It did turn into a match, and I won, and I retired undefeated. I think the only other person that's done that is Sting, so it's pretty good company.
There you go. You should be getting a title shot anytime soon.
No, please no, never again. Never again.
What has been your favorite match to referee? And you referee so many big matches now, like with iconic wrestlers like Sting and other people. Like you've been a part of so many moments. Like what for you kind of holds sentiment, a special sentiment for you? Like you're like, oh, that will always mean that'd be really special to me.
There are a number of matches that come to my mind when someone asks that question. And like most recently, the Toni Storm and Mariah May at All In was absolutely fantastic. Partly because like everyone involved with that, both in the ring and behind the scenes, the people that were helping kind of put it together, like that was such a big moment for sort of all of us and a good culmination of a lot of things that had happened up to that point, that regardless of, you know, Mariah winning the title and the crowd reception, all of these things, like it was meaningful for us. But I think the one that stands out the most in my mind is Wrestle Dream last year with Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. I remember when it got announced, I was actually at NEW and I saw the graphic backstage, and I immediately text Paul Turner, who's our senior official and does all the assignments. I go, Paul, I know I don't ask for anything often, but this was literally my dream match before I ever stepped into the ring. So can I please do this?
Yeah.
And he said, sure. Yeah, no problem. And then the day of, we actually found out that it was right before the Jericho match.
Yeah.
So I had to do an hour straight in the ring for that
Just
show.
double duty. That's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was sick the weekend before, so I could only breathe out of one nostril. And the whole show, like both of my matches went extremely well. So I'm like, dude, this is my Jordan flu game. Like, this is awesome. But also incredible is just like Bryan Danielson's, one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. Zack Sabre Jr. is one of the best technical wrestlers of all time. And seeing those two guys step into the ring and being a part of it, like, I love technical wrestling, and when it's done well, I think it is one of the best types of wrestling. So being a part of that was both meaningful for me as a referee, because it was like a true masterclass of, this is a number of skill sets that we have to teach referees as they're coming up in the indies. But also just as a fan, I'm sitting there like, how free and cool is this?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, because I think with refereeing, you got to master refereeing so many different sorts of matches, and especially in AEW, there's a lot of different sorts of matches. There's chaotic, there's good technical wrestling, there's everything. But yeah, I think, that's an interesting point that I don't think if anyone's out there trying to be an aspiring referee, that's something to think about, is to try a little bit of everything. That was a great match, one of the best matches I've seen in recent years for sure. Yeah. I want to ask you this. I don't want to get into details about the video game or anything, but is there plans for another video game, or is it still we're just upgrading this one as we go?
Well, sir, plans for other video games. I currently have 2 video games out on the App Store, AEW Rise to the Top and AEW Figure Fighters. So you can download those both now on Android and Apple devices. I actually did not work on Fight Forever, so I can't really comment on that at all. There was a team working on that, and they basically said, hey, we've got this whole mobile division. Can you kind of take care of that? So I was working on Elite General Manager as that game was kind of coming together. And then I've moved into Rise to the Top. I moved into Figure Fighters. And then I may or may not be working on other stuff. But I've been very busy with the AEW game side of things during the entire time that Fight Forever was sort of in the public space and whatnot, just kind of over here in the corner by myself. It's like, yeah, you guys handle that. I'm just going to go play over here, and we're just going to keep releasing all of these awesome games. So,
that still has to be super cool for you too, that you went to school for that, you got a degree in that, and then you still got to be involved in video games and creating games while you're working this other dream job as a referee in AEW.
It was really funny how it happened, because my background's in computer science. I went into video games. I did programming. I did mostly production. I had, before I even started at AEW, I had shipped 6 titles. I had worked on 12, many had which that had been canceled. And so I'm working at AEW, and they have no idea what my background is. And then I think it was the first All Out in Chicago. Someone's trying to get a printer working, and wrestlers are notoriously bad at technology. And I'm like, oh, sure, I can just do it. And I hop on the browser. I start trying to download drivers and stuff. And they're like, you know what you're doing? And I'm like, yeah, no, this is my background. Like, wait, what? And I gave someone my resume, and they're like, you have a resume? I'm like, yes, guys. And once they'd figured out what my background was, they were trying to start to spin up AEW games, or at least the idea of it, and the conversations with various different developers. And I just kind of got sucked into it. So it was funny having gone through the mental process of I am leaving this life behind. I am leaving this career behind, and then coming over here and I'm like, actually, no, let's bring that back. But it's been extremely helpful, because there's a lot of times where I'll be in meetings with developers and we're talking about AEW, and they're watching the show, and they know that I'm on the show, and they see me every week. And then I tell them yeah, I worked on Scribblenauts and I do all these things. And they're like, oh, so you I'm like, yes, I know what I'm doing. It's okay. You can send me art that's not done, and I'm not going to panic about it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's your boy, the Wrestling Classic here, guys. I want to let you guys know that there's a limited edition Wrestling Classic tee. I'm wearing it right now, but I got to show you the back, because it's in collaboration with none other than HQ Clothing, guys. It says Conquered in the back, because that's what we do. We're out here conquering it every day, guys. Wear this shirt, remember to conquer it. Do the thing, keep doing the thing. HQ Clothing, Headquarters Clothing, limited edition Wrestling Classic shirts. There's only like 70 left. There's only 100 printed. Make sure you get them before they're gone. I truly, truly, truly appreciate your support. Conquer it. Get it now. Put the link in the description below.
So I was going to bring up AEW Unrestricted next, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to bring this up because I think you'll relate to this. It is funny sometimes when you are interviewing people or you're talking to people and you're asking them about their stories and they tell you about a bunch of stuff they did before wrestling or whatnot. And they're like, oh yeah, I did like theater, I did some acting school. Oh, I did this, I did that. And they write it off as like it was something they did but didn't work out. And then you're able to be like, hey, did you realize how all of that helped you be good at what you're doing right now?
Oh, dude, being a referee is a combination of being a project manager and a ballerina.
Yeah.
Like, I've been preparing for this my whole life, despite not doing it until I was 30. Like,
yeah, it's like when you're like, oh, like I thought I left that behind, and like that was what I did.
Nope,
and
I kind of need all these things, and it's like the Venn diagram of all the things I do. There's actually a massive amount of overlap that I didn't plan for, but you know,
I always find that so fascinating. Like then people like you'll be sitting with someone, they're like, oh wait, that's true. Oh yeah, like and it's like like it all kind of comes. The universe works in weird ways, but it all kind of comes together. You know,
right. You mean you're managing time on TV? And I'm like, yes, you have allocated resources and you have so much scope you have to do. And I start describing like the iron triangle project management methods and shit. And it's funny.
AEW Unrestricted, you started it with Tony Schiavone. It was a
Yes.
show that you guys started to kind of let people in on the wrestlers and kind of have you guys' own AEW branded podcast. Now it's you and Will Washington. You guys are doing the thing. I know what it's like to do these and have conversations with people. They're all fantastic. They're always fun. But are there a couple, like say if someone hasn't listened to any episodes, what episodes would you recommend them to be like, maybe go listen to these ones? There's some really cool stories there.
So for a long time, one of my favorites was very early on. I think it was like episode 3 or 4 was with Billy Gunn. And it was before he was wrestling for us. So he had just been hired to be a coach backstage and help out with production of matches. And it's very interesting the way he talks about his sons, Austin and Colton, his biological sons, not his adopted sons of the Acclaim. But like they hadn't been at AEW yet because neither of them stepped into the ring until the pandemic. So it was very interesting to go back and listen to that and like hear a father talk about his sons in a way when it's like, now those guys are my friends. And I think I had refed like all 50 of Colton's matches up to like when he first joined AEW. So it was really interesting. But Billy Gunn is hilarious and he's one of my favorite people in the world. So he's great. He came on again later. His second episode was awesome. We recently had MXM Collection on. And they are fantastic. Like they're everyone's new favorite tag team, only to be rivaled by the Outrunners, which is another episode that just came out. It's very good. I mean, one of them had like, it was like straight up 80s, like filter on the camera. And there's so much flexing and so many times sunglasses come off for emphasis and then get put back on. And it probably broke the record for that, but it's been really fascinating. Like we get to talk to all of the wrestlers and Will and I, given that, you know, I'm an in-ring performer and Will works in creative, like we have unique relationships with these wrestlers that other people interviewing them don't necessarily have. So immediately you have this sort of connection with your subject matter that you necessarily wouldn't have otherwise. But then we also get to promote a lot of people behind the scenes. Like very recently we had Chris Estelle on. He's our head of wardrobe. So like he's the one who's making iconic looks for Maxwell Jacob Friedman, for Bryan Danielson, for Chris Jericho, for he does all of my shirts. Like he does so much stuff that people don't realize. Like, no, the reason why Bryan Danielson wears like literal like scales on his jacket is because of this guy. We had our entire Team Psych on because AEW really prioritizes mental health on the day we are recording this. It's Mental Health Day. But we've got 3 different sort of therapists on staff, one that travels with us constantly, and then 2 others that sort of cycle in that are there in the event that our talent and our staff need someone to talk with. So it's great to be able to promote both the talent on the ring, but also talk about all of the aspects at AEW that make it a great place to work.
No, it's a tremendous, and I also think it is really good that it is kind of an in-house like AEW branded podcast because that does make a difference. There are certain interviewers I remember I was like, you know, it's sometimes easier listening to them do interviews because you know there's a prior relationship here and that trust is already there.
Right.
That the talent, like even myself, like any talent that I've already built relationships with and they come on, the conversation's a lot easier. Don't get me wrong, this is really easy. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we're both West Coasters and we're just chatting.
We're both West Coasters. We're both podcasters. It's just immediately like, okay, let's hit the ground running.
You're like, all right, I know what we're doing it. I'm like, I know what we're doing here. We're on it. But like for the most part, when you know someone already a bit and you have that connection, like they come on a lot more comfortable, and you guys both work with these people. They come on like, oh yeah, like I don't have to, because
it's tricky. It's tricky when you're talking to someone who maybe you don't necessarily know, and it's especially in a
you don't know the questions
medium.
come in. You get a little gun shy. You don't want to say anything that you don't mean to say, and it gets taken out of context. Like, it's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk.
It is. It's harder than it looks. It's a little, especially when you have a co-host, because you're trying not to talk over them. But at the same time, like sometimes there are things like, no, I have a thought. Let me do this thing. Let me talk. Let me ask this question.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like there's a lot of things I've had to learn over the years where it's like, not to cut people off or like let the person keep talking, and like you still do sometimes, but like you're more aware of it as you do it more. And I think that's like the story of life generally. The more you do something, the more you get better at it and you learn and you grow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
AEW, 5 years. 5 years of AEW. I remember talking to people at the beginning and they were like, hey, it's very just like sticks and stones right now, small crew. We got a skeleton crew. It's a small team here. We're just building. You were there since the beginning. You were part of that original skeleton.
Day one.
One of the original bones. How does it like? What does AEW mean to you now? At this point, you've been there for 5 years. You've seen the growth. You've seen the highs, the lows, the good stuff, the bad. You've been there for it all. Like when you sit back, you think of AEW and also like what it's done for your life, and then also all you've been able to do there. Like, what does AEW mean to you?
It's incredible to see all of the things that we as a company have been through. Like knowing that we were in Jacksonville for 1.5 years during a pandemic, and that feels like a lifetime ago. But at the time, we didn't know when we were leaving. And it's a very different AEW then than it is now. There's definitely different periods of time that we see AEW go through. Like when we were doing Darks in Orlando, before Rampage, before Collision, there's so much growth that just has happened that has affected our lives, like where we are every week, where we're traveling to, all these sort of things. So just seeing the different format that AEW has taken, especially knowing like our next television deal, we're going to be streaming. That's an entirely different audience, like streaming simultaneously as we're on cable. So we get to keep our current audience and grow and be in front of different eyeballs than we have been previously. Like seeing that growth has been really cool, because I remember the day when we got our first television deal, we were in Miami and it was insane and everybody was around and Shad Khan was walking around congratulating everybody. But that's sort of the feeling of AEW. I feel like that's a big part that hasn't gone away, is that sort of feel of camaraderie. And it's always cliche to say it, but that feeling of family. Like it was Tony Khan's birthday and he had ordered a bunch of cupcakes and they were vegan and gluten-free. And he's like, came by and offered me one. Like, this is a guy who has too many things to do, but somehow remembers my dietary restrictions. Yeah. Like, that's fascinating, right? Like, how many times can you say a boss remembers specifically your dietary restrictions? It's not really something that happens often. And then seeing like the different roster that has come in, like, I was really fortunate when I came in, I was on the indies. So I knew a good chunk of the people because I'd actually worked with them before. And now I'm seeing people come in who have been my heroes and people I have idolized. Like I remember once flying to Brooklyn to see Mercedes Moné wrestle because of what she meant to women's wrestling. And now having worked with her multiple times in officiating title matches with her is just insane. Bryan Danielson has been my favorite wrestler since I started watching wrestling, and being a part of all of these amazing moments, and like sitting by the stage at Wembley and seeing him win a title, like just tears streaming down my eyes. Like, it's insane that all of these things have happened, that we've grown to this point that we are, you know, a real competitor to a company that's been around 40 plus years. And it's just what it's done for the business, right? Like having different companies allows you to negotiate. It gives people more opportunities for jobs, gives people more opportunities for growth. Competition is always good for everyone because you're always trying to bring your A game. It's just been fantastic to see us grow and change over time. And we still have that very scrappy attitude. Like there's a number of people, I can't be the only one to say it, but there's a number of people that wear multiple hats backstage, and they still do to this day, and they have since day one. But we've been able to bring in a lot of different people. I think we finally have over 100 full-time staff at AEW in different roles and whatnot. Like our legal team is more than just one person now, which is insane. It's
That's
crazy.
insane.
It's,
No,
it's,
because I
it's
remember,
incredible.
I remember the early days and talking to certain people that were there, and they're just like, no, it's a really small team, and like we're growing, and there's been a lot that I've had conversation, and it's like as much as the company has grown, and it is a big company, it is a competitor. It's still like it's 5 years old. It's still a small
Mhm.
company in a different perspective, where it's like the amount that you guys have been able to achieve as the small company that just started 5 years ago is insane. That
Right,
growth,
like,
you
5 years
know?
ago, we were coming home from the hospital, and now we're going to
Yeah,
kindergarten. Like, that's in the
yeah,
grand scheme of things, like, that's really what's happening, whereas, like, the other guys are, starting to file for AARP accounts. So, like,
yeah.
there's a big
Well,
difference when you think about it.
yeah, and that's a good perspective to put in too. Like, I know there's a lot of Americans out there, so I put it in this term because in Canada it's 5 years of high school, but like the 5 years of middle school and high school,
Mhm.
that's the 5 years. Then the rest of your life starts after that too. And if you've experienced that, like, oh, I grow. You continue to grow when things change so much, and that's what I think is happening with AEW. And you guys have done a lot that has created more opportunities, more room for growth. It's great for people in the industry in terms of talent and negotiating and other options of things they can do, and I think it's super cool. And for you to be there since day one must be like super cool.
It's wild. It's completely changed my life for the better. I get to travel the world. I yell at half naked men on TV. Like, you can't really complain. But it's also given me the perspective of meeting a lot of different people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Like, the
Yeah,
tech industry is so small compared to other industries, and wrestling is even smaller, but we have people coming in from all different facets of life. So the amount of people I have in my life that I call friends that I never would have met otherwise is absolutely insane. Being able to be on a platform and represent myself. Like, there are literally 3 women in the world who do my job full time. There are 2 at
yeah,
WWE, and then there's me. So to be a woman on screen weekly, consistently, in a role that has been previously dominated by men for like the entirety of wrestling is absolutely freaking cool, and not something that I ever expected to do, but it is something I do with a lot of pride.
and I think it's a cool example of like there's other things you can do, because when you're younger, when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be a wrestler, and like that's it. But maybe you're not the most athletic to be a wrestler, maybe whatever. But like there's other things you can do, and I think nowadays they're like with representation, with you being a referee and a female referee, those little girls would be like, oh, maybe even if I don't want to be a wrestler, maybe I would be a referee, and like maybe they actually want to be like maybe that's the goal now, and they're
Yeah, the
dressing up
first time I
like
had
you.
parents like tell me like, "Oh yeah, my daughter wants to be a referee," I was like, "This would not have happened
Yeah,
literally 10 years ago." Like,
yeah,
there was no one. There was no one on TV who would have thought like this could be something that someone said, but now it's something I've heard more than once, which is
yeah.
insane to me. Like, it's crazy to see the grand scheme that we have and how much we touch the lives of all of the people that watch our show. And
Yeah.
it is something that I am absolutely grateful for.
Let's talk about something that is a little polarizing with the people, but your performances as a referee. Uh, like, how do you come up with the facial expressions you do, and how do you come up with like where your place is in that match? Because I have heard you in the past say like like the referee is part of the match, and I 110% totally agree with that.
Mhm.
I think there is a lot more aspects to a match than just the two people wrestling in the ring or how many people are wrestling. There's the crowd, there's the ref, there's a lot of factors that people don't see. How do you feel about like just the way the internet reacts?
I would say my block list on Twitter is probably longer than my follower list. I'll get that out of the way. Social media is a bit of a beast, and I feel like if you don't manage it in a way that's best for your mental health, it could negatively impact you in a lot of ways. And I mean, the short story is like, if my boss is happy, if my coworkers are happy, if I'm getting positive feedback at work and the paychecks are still coming, then obviously I'm doing something right. Like,
Yeah,
I had a new t-shirt come out today. I have an action
yeah,
figure. Like, something's going right, guys.
yeah,
Ultimately it's entertainment. There's always going to be criticism. I mean, we see it every Sunday when people are watching football and they're on their couch saying the quarterback's got to be doing this, the coach has got to be doing this. Like, what makes you think that you suddenly know better? Because
yeah,
there's a whole lot of other things happening that maybe you don't have the insight to. On top of that, I mean, it'd be silly to not mention there is a bit of sexism there. Like, there are a lot of things that I do in the ring that are the exact same as my male coworkers, but for some reason I get all of the criticism. And it's something that isn't the main source of it, but it'd be silly to not say that there is some of that there,
yeah.
which is one of the things that I take a lot of pride in being this role is that this is something new that is changing people's perspective of it. Before me, before Jess, before Daphne, there was not anyone else in this role doing what we were doing. So there's some people that are kind of looking at this going, well, this isn't the picture of what I expect. But now the next generation of wrestlers is growing up and they expect to see a woman in stripes. So this is going to be changing over time and it's really great. So ultimately, like, criticism is something that you can choose to pay attention to. But I think the important thing is, as long as it is constructive criticism and it is coming from the source that matters most, my coworkers, my boss, my peers, all of those people, like, that's really the most important.
No, for sure. I mean, that's where that term armchair quarterback comes from, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, and armchair referees now too. But like, no, I think it's true, and I think I actually, it's funny because I put out a tweet about this yesterday. I was like, no matter like how much, no matter what, like if you have any sort of influence, and me myself, like I don't think I have an influence sometimes, and people tell me I do, but
you do on someone. Like that's the thing, is that you don't realize how big your impact is until someone tells you.
So the moment you have influence, the power of influence over anything or anybody, you're not going to make everybody happy. You're not going to be doing enough for somebody or doing too much for someone else. There'll be jealousy. There'll be people that think they can do it better. You're not going to be able to satisfy everyone, and that's okay. But you got to do what you're doing, because realistically, you're breaking down a barrier. You're doing something new, so it sticks out like a sore thumb rather than just fitting in. And when you
what did Ron Swanson say? Like, don't half-ass a bunch of things, whole-ass one thing.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Commit yourself to being the best that you can be and improving as many opportunities as you can. And as long as the people that matter most are happy with what you're doing, like, exactly, you're not going to please everybody, but that's not the idea. Like, wrestling is an art form. It's subjective. There are going to be things that people like, and there's going to be things that people don't like. And that's one of the great things, going back to the idea of fans. Like, fans can cheer for the things they like. Like, that's one of the beauties of wrestling, is that it's instantaneous feedback for what people enjoy seeing. And even if you're booing somebody, the loudness of those boos is hugely impactful to all of us listening to things and going, "Ooh, this is huge." Like, my mom tells me who she likes to see. And if Takesha's not on TV enough, she gets mad. I'm just going to put that out there.
No, he's great. He's great. He should be
fantastic.
On TV, right? He is. But like, Don Draper once says, not about fitting in, it's about standing out. And when you stand out, you're putting a bigger spotlight on yourself. And with that spotlight comes a lot of, you got to take the good and the bad criticism. And I think you handle it very well. And I just thought that's something we should bring up, because today is mental. Like I said, I don't know when this is coming out, but to break the fourth wall, it's also National Mental Health Day.
You mean people record podcasts ahead of time? What?
But and I've been very fortunate. I got a bunch in a row, so I got to figure out where I'm dropping them all.
Oh, that's so good, dude. When you don't have that cue and something comes up, you're just like, oh god, when am I going to record? Like, it's something that like people don't understand unless you record podcasts. Like that idea of like, oh no, we don't have a backlog. We got to come up with something.
Yeah. Oh, like I got like 4 in the bag. This is great. Like,
oh, you're.
But when you have nothing, you're like, yeah. Like, I think I'm set for the next month, but no, it is National Mental Health, and I thought that's something because social media is a big thing. Like, we're kind of around the same age. We didn't have it when we were kids. We were outside playing outside, and our social media was getting mad at each other in person or passing notes. Or like the first phones that you had to press one button to get like the right letter.
T9 where you had to press like.
I had the Nokia with Snake on it. On it.
Snake was one of those things like my English teacher hated when we all got cell phones in high school, because it's like, no, you can't play Snake when we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, but you're all have the phone underneath, and because it was physical, you could like guess what letter you were hitting based on how many times you pressed it. So you
I learned how to do that. That's crazy. And then obviously went through the BlackBerry Razor crazy phase. But my brother had a pager. Like, what was that all about?
Right? Do you remember pagers? Like, oh my god.
But social media is crazy, and I think the future, it's gonna it's good to talk about these things to let younger people know, like, hey, like, don't let it bother you that much. Like, block people if you want to block them.
It's easy to say, don't worry about it. Like, that's always the one thing, right? But it's finding out ways that you can positively like take something away from it. Like, I like to say I'm the queen of silver linings. Like, if people are talking negatively about me, well, they must be watching the show. And that's good.
And you always got to pay attention to that, because it's I think it's just human nature. It happens to the best of us. All these people will support you, and like all these people will say all these nice things to you, and like 1 or 2 people will say something mean, and those 1 or 2 things are the things that stick with you. But then you have to like think in your brain, like, wait, the rest of these people are being very supportive. Why am I paying attention to these two? Like, that's not
Exactly.
like, okay, silver lining, all these people like me. I must be doing something right. Like, don't worry
It's
about
very
these
easy to pay
two.
attention to the one criticism, but like, don't forget that 1,000 people said something nice. Like,
Yeah.
take those moments and bank them so that when you have like a bad day, you can go back to it. Like, there's this little girl based out of Jacksonville. Her name's Morgan, and
Yeah.
she always shows up to shows dressed like me. And her parents know people that I know, so there's a connection there. But one day I was having a bad day, and I said there was some people that were like bugging me on social media, and it was really bad. And somehow I get a video that she records. She goes, "I just want you to know that you're awesome, and there's people that support you, and don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about." And to have this little message come from a 6-year-old.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, like, that's what's important, right? Like,
Yeah.
I hope everyone finds a Morgan in their life and can kind of keep that, so that when you're having a bad day, when somebody says something negative that maybe, isn't true, but it's still bugging you anyway, like, remember there are people in the world that love and support you and appreciate everything that it is you're doing.
Yeah, and those people that they look up to you and you inspire them, and it's like, to know that is like, it's a good thing. So you got to keep doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
Very last question, and we'll wrap this up. I always end with this question. I always ask this question, and I already know the answer like 90% of the time, but I'm still going to ask it because I always like to hear people reflect on it themselves. Because I'm a big believer in, sometimes I base decisions, and it's maybe not the best way to base decisions, but sometimes I base decisions off of, man, would like 12-year-old Justin think this is cool? Will 5-year-old Justin think this is cool? So at this point of your life, do you feel like you've made your younger self proud?
I think I made my younger self very confused, because it's like, I thought you were into video games. What are you doing now, lady? Like, we were playing Zelda on the N64. Why are you suddenly flying around all the places? So it's very interesting, because without the full backstory, it's like, how did we end up here?
Yeah.
I would just think that my 12-year-old self would be very happy with the fact that 36-year-old version of herself is extremely happy. Like, I have never been happier doing anything. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Like, I'm happy. I have a wonderful life. I have a loving marriage. I have an oyster farm that brings me joy. Like, I have all these random things that just bring me joy on a day-to-day basis. And I think part of that, and a big part of that, is AEW and the opportunities that they've afforded me. So regardless of how I got here or what I do, I think 12-year-old me would be pretty pumped.
That's awesome. We got to run this back one day in the future, because
Hell yeah,
I think
man.
there's a lot more about you that I just heard out of this answer. I'm like, oh, what else is there about Aubrey outside of wrestling? Oyster
Right?
farm. Okay.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, but
Want to do a podcast just about that? I could fill at least an hour.
yeah, I've had like the most random, like I've had guys like I want to like I've had guys like Jimmy Jacobs come on here.
Mhm.
I've had guys like Danielson come on here, and we'll be talking about just like spirituality for like the first 30 minutes. And I'm like,
those
what
two
are we?
guys in particular.
I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, we should probably talk about wrestling. Like, me and Danielson start talking about ants in space, and then I always jokingly,
Dude, he did the ants in space thing to me. We were sitting in the freaking gate in some random ass town. And he's like, have you ever thought about intelligent life and why we don't try to find more? Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe the ants are the intelligent life on the planet? Because there's more ants now than there have ever been people. Like, it is the most Danielson conversation that has ever happened. Or like, I'm learning physics from a book. How does the earth not spin out of control from the sun? Like, he's exactly the guy that you think he is.
So,
and
like,
it's so funny.
Those podcasts are sometimes real fun. I always jokingly bring it up now when I do get him on the show. But we did a live show here in Vancouver, and I was in the back with him, and we were just kind of like going through the fans Q&As and just kind of like chatting between each other about like whatever stuff. And then somehow we got into that, and he went on and on and on. I was in there, like, I was in it, I was invested, and I was like, and then we go on the stage, and I'm like, I went on the stage, and all my nerves are gone. I'm like, oh, maybe that was to like him being like, let's not think about this wrestling stuff. Let's talk about ants in space. Because by the time I went on there, I was like, oh, like I feel like we got this repertoire. We're good. Like we're fine. But
he does that a lot. He likes to ask people very deep personal questions about like their role in the universe backstage. And I know that at one point he's not going to be wrestling anymore, and that's actually one of the things I'm going to miss most about him is just his randomness and the things that he's learning about and trying to like get people interested. Like I don't want to talk about rotational physics right now. Like I'm trying to go out and ref. Thank you so much. But
oh man, we're just talking about time and what it means and the human centipede. Like we just went off the rails sometimes.
Oh, buddy.
Those are sometimes the best podcasts. So maybe I'll get you on one day and we'll talk about more Aubrey outside of wrestling.
Oh, buddy, it's gonna be a good one.
I appreciate your time. This is a pleasure. And everybody check out everything AEW is doing. There's got a new deal. They're going to be on Max.
Yes.
You guys can stream. Finally, I know in Canada you could on TSN Plus if you were subscribed, but now in America you can stream all the old episodes of Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage on Max, I believe. Plus more details to come out because there are still a lot more details to come out. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun. We should definitely do it again. And one day I'll head up there. We'll see each other at a show. It'll be great.
Yeah. Now next time I see you, I'll be like, okay, maybe she'll remember me this time. I'll say hello. Because sometimes I get that imposter syndrome. I'm like, nobody knows who I am. I'm just gonna like stand over here.
There's also the problem in wrestling where you meet someone like 6 times and you're like, have I met you before? And they're like, yes, we've met like 3 times. And then you get
offended after because you're like, oh, embarrassed. That's a better way to put it. Where you're like, maybe okay, they don't know me at all. Like
right. It's like, no, you just meet a lot of people. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's literally everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. But like now I think with situations like this, but it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing and we'll see everyone. We'll see you down the road. WrestleDream,
bye.
Guys. Check it out. Bye.
It's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.